Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Popcast. Whenever you're listening to this, whether it be live or a VOD, Twitch or YouTube, while you are watching random Jeopardy clips on YouTube like I was doing last night as I was going to bed, registering early for low ink like you should be doing, or holding a press conference representing the President of the United States at not the Four Seasons Hotel, but a Four Seasons construction company on accident. Whatever it is that you're doing right now, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to this. Unless I don't. Last week I had a really great conversation with Yeet representing the Splatoon amateur circuit, which is going to be coming back in January. The VOD for that is up on YouTube. That seemed to be a pretty popular episode with people as I expected it to be. There was a really great conversation. We learned a lot about this upcoming SAC season, which appears to be a somewhat... it appears that they're going to be taking a lot of stuff that they've learned from this Midway tournament series that we've seen kind of pop up since SAC has gone away from the end of last season. Just a quick note. After playing in the Midway tournament last weekend, it kind of it makes me kind of confused why they decided to bring back a second Midway season before bringing back another SAC season. I say that because this midway, like the target teams they're trying to get into midway, which is like what, lower Div 1 on down. So they're looking for like Div 1 and Div 2 teams to sign up for this. But the teams that made the top 8 last season, I assumed, are banned. And since Ludi Divs haven't been updated and we haven't had another SAC season to ban more teams from SAC, we this past midway, this second midway season seems more like a preview of a bunch of teams that are going to be playing in SAC next season. I would assume Pure Divinity would be a team that would be eligible for SAC, and they're finishing in second place in that last midway tournament. So, I would encourage more teams, if you're interested in doing SAC, sign up for these midway tournaments. They don't seem as scary as the ones in the past as far as the top dog teams that have been signing up for it. I don't know if that's going to change in the future or if we see some SAC teams play too good in midway and end up getting banned early. So I don't know. That's just something I kind of noticed playing in it myself. But we're not talking about last week anymore. We're talking about this week, where I will be recapping Checkpoint 1. They held an in-house tourney this past weekend. Their second in-house tourney, I should say. Also, I will be chatting with Roundy, who's a part of this new group that released a new ranking for the top 50 Western Splatoon teams. If you've been an avid listener of the Popcast, which I know you are, I have often ranted about Ludi Divs being not good for us in terms of taking those divs, those tournament seedings, and turning them into a way to rank everybody in our entire community. So I wanted to get Roundy in to get his perspective on this new poll that I assume is the intent to try to take attention away from Ludi as a ranking system and having a more concrete, actual, legit ranking system for this community. So I think this is the building block. So I wanted to bring in Roundy to get his perspective on how things have been going so far. But first, this upcoming Saturday, we have the Minnow Cup going on at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. This is for Div 4 and below teams only, like you would see in Low Inc. The unique twist about this tournament is that you only play one mode each tournament, and there's going to be in a series of 4 tournaments, 1 per month. This month's tournament is going to be Tower Control. For those of you who've been around the community long enough to know about BNS, this appears to be like the lower level version of BNS. Back when you did one mode over and over and over again, where you signed up for it if it was Splat Zones, and you begrudgingly signed up for it if it was Rainmaker. But Tower Control, I don't know, I think that's a happy medium. There are worse modes, in my opinion. On the same day, literally 1 hour after the start time of the Minnow Cup, Ash Cup is going on. Once again, this tournament is for teams in Div 4 and below. This is happening on Saturday, again, at the same time. I believe this is the 6th Ash Cup. 6th or 5th. It is the 6th one. Let's see. My team won the 3rd one. So we just count up from that. I guess that was 3 tournaments ago. Ash Cup is a bi-weekly tournament. I would consider it to be if we had like a triple crown, so to speak. It was like the 3 lower level pillars of this community. It obviously Low Inc. I would consider Ash Cup to be a part of that. Maybe Little Squid League would be the 3rd, just because they've had multiple tournaments for several months now as well. I would have included Xanadu, but Xanadu's kind of taking the bounce out of the lower level and moving more to mid-level kind of scene. Here's the issue, though, is that we've had tournaments run at the same time before in the past. I mean, the last low ink speed ladder was going on at the same time. That was fine though, because speed ladder is going to attract teams that aren't going to sign up for low ink, and most low ink teams, while they would be interested in playing speed ladder, they're not going to leave low ink to play in speed ladder. This is the first time though where we've had two tournaments literally catering to the same exact teams going on within an hour apart of each other, and that sucks. And it's not good. Um, and I'm not like throwing shade on anybody or anyone in particular, or anything like that. But at the start of this tournament, or at the start of this podcast, the Middle Cup currently has 24 teams registered, with one pending. And Ash Cup has 6. That's not good. I mean, the 24 for Minnow Cup, their first tournament, that's amazing. The 6 for Ash Cup is not good. We need Ash Cup to be a strong tournament that has more teams registering, but at the same time, we need to help encourage these new tournaments like the Minnow Cup uh, to grow and to get more teams signed up for that as well. So it's this kind of awkward situation of we need both these tournaments to do well, but they're not going to if they're going to happen at the same time and compete against each other. Which leads to a bigger issue going on in the community, in the lower level community. I guess it's kind of a good problem to have, but it is something worth noting, is that we have a lot of tournaments right now, and that's a great thing. But the problem is, as the Moo pointed out, there's only so many weekends in a month. So, and Ash Cup is a bi-weekly tournament. But I mean, like, you look at a tournament like Little Squid League. They were going to have their tournament this past weekend. And it seemed like they were getting enough teams signed up that weren't. So I thought Little Squid League could have run at the same time as Checkpoint One. Obviously, Little Squid League, hats off to them. They decided to move their tournament anyways. I don't know what the date is for that. The only obvious solution would be the 28th of this month. But then again, if Minnow or Ash Cup moves, then they're gonna have to take the 28th. So that would bump Little Squid League out again. And this isn't the first time Little Squid League has bumped out. I think they've moved their tournament at least 3 times in the past. Not this upcoming tournament, but I know when Inkstorm 8 happened over the summer, Little Squid League moved for that, and I feel like they moved for a low ink or something at some point. So, so it's getting kind of crowded here. And again, I'm not going to take sides. I'm not going to tell anybody what to do. I just want to point it out. But I will say this to anybody who is looking to create a new tournament, specifically for the lower level community. That's great. If a lot of teams sign up for it, I'll cover it on the Popcast. It's a great thing to have. But here, I'm going to let you guys in on a little secret. You don't have to do your daggum tournament Saturdays at 1 p.m. Eastern time. Do you guys know we have this day called Sunday? you could legally do a tournament on a Sunday. You can do a tournament on a Saturday night at like 8 o'clock. You can do a tournament on a weekday. Do you guys know there's something other than Saturday at 1 o'clock? And again, I'm not pointing the finger at one person, because literally every lower level tournament is Saturday at 1 o'clock. Every single one of them. At some point, for us to expand, there's only so many Saturdays to work with, people. Move to a Sunday, move to a Saturday night. And I know you lose Europe. That's the main draw, is that you lose Europe. If you start later, you'll lose Europe. If you start earlier, you'll lose the West Coast. So I know there's like a trade-off to that. But we've reached the point. We're done. We're booked. This is the golden age of the lower level community. Again, when my team was growing up back in the old days, we had low ink once a month, and then we just got our butts beaten backwards in BNS every other week, and that was all we had. That was Oh, the good old days of 2018. Man, that sucked. I wish my team was good enough, not good enough, so that we could play in all these tournaments every single weekend. Now, and not to say there's enough things for my team to do, but when we were growing up, we didn't have these kinds of things. We had to walk up the snow and the mountains and the hills to get to class or whatever. You guys got these school buses. Like this is great, but for us to go even further, for us to expand even more, which we should be hoping to do, you guys are gonna have to come up with something that's not Saturday at 1 o'clock. It's booked. It's done. It's it's not free real estate anymore. You guys are gonna have to move to a weekend. You guys are gonna have to move to Sunday or Saturday night. And again, I'm not pointing the finger at anybody in particular. I'm happy for all the tournaments we have. I think everything is great. But for us to expand, if you want to do something new, look, Saturday at 1 o'clock is done, people. It's off the books. It's not an option anymore. End rant. Tofu, you do not miss I don't miss the old days. Old days sucked. Being playing at BNS, hoping that you can win 1 to 2 games sucked. That was not fun at all. I'm much, I'm much more happier now that we can hold our own against teams now. But it took us 2 years to get to this point. Anyways, checkpoint one, the tournament that happened this past Saturday. Really fun tournament. I didn't watch it live. I went back and watched it last night / this morning, right before the podcast started. But this thing got a lot of attention. First off, IPL took over streaming for it to help it out. I don't know if IPL is straight up like absorbed Checkpoint One. I think Checkpoint One pretty much runs itself. We just help out with the production end of things, and that gave it a lot of exposure. When I watched it last night, the Twitch video had over 1,000, I think 1,500 views, which is a lot, which is a lot of views. So a lot of eyeballs that were on this tournament. You saw a lot. Now this is like the lowest of the low level, which is good, which is important. We need to cater. We need more things that cater to players that are not all X rank, or teams that don't have all their X ranks but are still interested in competitive while they build themselves up to be at a X rank skill level. I know Magic has talked a lot about the kind of the gatekeeping that we have in this community of like, you need to get across this certain threshold before you can even consider competitive. Well, Checkpoint One tournament kind of proves that you don't. You can play in a really fun 5-round Swiss tournament against a bunch of other teams that don't have their X ranks. And so shout out to Checkpoint One for creating this tournament. That could become really big. Honestly, really big. Because, like, again, if you think about it, all X rank players make up 1% of the community. That is true. That is true. It might not seem like it to us because we live in our X-ranked sheltered world, but 99% of this community is casuals. So Checkpoint One is a tournament that caters to them. It makes sense why it would be getting a lot of views, and hopefully we can get some more teams signed up for it this time or next time around. But being the casual tournament that it is, you see a lot of weird comps that you don't normally see in competitive, which is fine. I saw a double Brella comp at one point, double anchor comps at some point. A lot of stick players, which is fine. It's kind of funny when the spectator cam goes to somebody and it's extremely obvious that player is using sticks. Again, is fine. I was a huge advocate for using sticks for a long time. In fact, I got my first X rank using sticks on tower control with Hydra. And then I was like, well, I want to get my other X rank, so I better switch to motion. But still, you can see like the building blocks here. You can see a lot of teams in this tournament that are like starting out, and you could see like, okay, a year from now or so, this is the future of the community, right? This is the future of Low Ink, are all these teams that we saw on stream in the Checkpoint One in-house tournament. And a lot of this tournament got a lot of support. I was looking over the chat. I saw a lot of Low Ink veteran players slash teams that were in the chat, like players that were way too good for Checkpoint One, and you would assume would have no business or any care to actually pay attention to this tournament. But no, you saw a lot of people encouraging these new players, and that's good. We need more of these upper level Low Ink teams and Low Ink champion teams to kind of help encourage these new teams to kind of come up. Not in like a condescending way, but not that I'm saying I saw anybody do that, but just in a cheering, rooting on kind of way. And we saw a lot of that in the chat for this tournament. So that was really cool to see. And before we get into the actual games, with any tournament that has pickup teams in it, I'm going to make fun of your stupid team names that you come up with here. So let's look at this real quick. And first off, these weren't nearly as bad as the ones that we saw in Launch Point. Some of the ones in Launch Point were just flat out bad. Some of these were acceptable. A lot of these are actual legit teams. I Ride, Omega Rush, Luminescent Ink Alpha Squids, Squids with Guns, Inkcraft Cult, Gold Rush Blush, Nazareth College Esports, and I think CIA played, or they got a cross through them, so they might have dropped. I don't know what's up with that. But those are the teams that are actual legit, at least the ones that I know of that played in this tournament. You got a team called Lightbulb. Okay, that's fine. Teenage Mutant Ninja Squids. Obviously, that was the one my wife was on, so I can't make fun of that. That one gets the job done. Slain Berries. That team was interesting because they used the double anchor comp, so they didn't have much slaying action going on there. But Slain Berries, that's fine, I guess. Kazoo Crew. I like that one. I like Kazoo Crew. That one gets the job done. Order 66. That's and then you got a couple of teams that did the standard, like, let's just take the first letter of everybody on our team and make an anagram. So you got Cats. I'm assuming Cats is because that's in all caps. CATS. You got TNGBP, which in parentheses says, team name, guys. Babies, please. Fantastic Four. The two names I want to point out here is Thanksgiving Dinner, and I'll get to those guys later because they did make Top Cut and they were on stream. There's more to talk about with Thanksgiving Dinner when we get to them. But the last team I want to talk about here, team name wise, Inksurance Agency. And there it is, ladies and gentlemen. It's done. That is the last ink pun that we could possibly come up with. We've covered everything. There is no other ink pun that could possibly be made. Now, I say that and I'm knowing in my mind that there are about 10 million other ink puns you guys can come up with. But stop it. Stop it, please. We've had enough. 17 teams signed up in the last Low Ink with the word ink in their name. We don't need any more. I'll give Inksurance Agency a pass because that's clever. That is clever. But some of you are coming up with ink pun names that are redundant and don't get the job done. So here is my decree. Inksurance Agency is the last team I'm giving a pass to for using the word ink in their name. The next team I see with the word ink in their name that is not as clever as Inksurance, I am going to shame you publicly in any form I can come up with. Stop it. Stop it. You are better than that. Anyways, Since there are not a lot of teams here that I'm familiar with, I'm not going to do my traditional, here's my winners from Swiss, here's my Ink Floyd. Yeah, I guess that one's good too. Okay, I'll give that one a pass as well. Anyways, um, so I'm just going to go off of what was on stream um, this time around. First off, and in kind of upsettingly, a lot of these were 3-0s, but it is what it is. First off, with Squids with Guns, question mark at the end. They seem to be confused about what their team name is. So be it. Played Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four won this one 3-0. The only player on Fantastic Four that stood out to me was Lepto Flare, which they played for Twisted Tranquility, which I believe has disbanded. I think I saw that on Twitter. But Lepto Fire was the only name on that team that I was aware of, and they played extremely well in this set. Squids with Guns, this is an actual legit team. They're not a pickup. They went 2-4 in October and ended up going 3-2 in this tourney. So you like to see some of the low ink teams that didn't qualify for Gamma but are getting close. You like to see them play in other tournaments. I'll talk more about that later. Other match on stream, Kazoo Crew. Good name. Ink is nowhere to be found in there. In fact, there's no I's or N's in that name at all. Unfortunately, they lost to Lightbulb 3-0. I don't know if I'm assuming both of these teams are pickups or free agent teams. But who knows? Maybe we'll see more from Kazoo Crew or Lightbulb down the road. Shoutouts to Michael on Lightbulb, who showed up and showed out with Blaster and K Pro in this set. Got a lot of high KAs there. The only match on stream from Swiss that was not a 3-0 was Inkcraft Cult versus team name guys, Baby Please. Inkcraft won 2-1. For TNGBP, we had a player named Fishy who used Luna Blaster and used it extremely well. Very, very impressive Luna play there from Fishy. For Inkcraft Cult, I do want to give a shout out to Val, the Charger, just because we don't see many Chargers in the lower level community anymore. I feel like the Charger weapon class is something, if you haven't been doing it for the past 2 years, you're not picking it up anymore. Like, we don't see new Charger players come around. Think about like the lower to mid-level Charger players that we have right now. I can think of like 5 off the top of my head, and all of them have been playing Charger like from day one. It seems like it's been nerfed to hell. And there's so many other things that you can do to counter it, that the only way you can play Charger now is if you're really, really stinking good at it. And really good Chargers are extremely difficult to play against. It seems to be a dying breed or a lost art. So whenever I see a Charger player play and win for their team, I give a shout out to it. So nice play there, Val. Inkcraft Colt went 2-4 in October in low ink. Went 3-2 here. I've seen them play in several of the Little Squid League tournaments. So here you go. Once again, an example. You teams that are not making Gamma Bracket yet in low ink, what do? Play in more tournaments. Look at what ITAP has done. Look where they started out at. Hell, look at where Xanadu started out at. The more tournaments you play in, the more experience you get, the better your team becomes down the road. Luminescent Ink versus Slain Berries. LI being a team that is experienced. They're 3-3 in October in low ink. They made Gamma Bracket. They finished 4-1 here. Obviously, they were just a little bit of a better team. Not a good matchup to be on stream. A nice win for LI, though. For Slain Berries, Rabbits had some really sexy shots with Charger. Love seeing some Charger play here in the lower level community. So shout outs to Rabbits. and to Yuki on Tri-Slosher for Slaying Berries. Had some really nice action there in this set as well. My boys, the Insurance Agency, took on Gold Rush Blush and lost 3-0. For Insurance Agency, we had Inya on Tri-Slosher. A lot of really nice Tri-Slosher play in this tournament here. You love to see that. Gold Rush Blush had Narvgena, who popped off on both C and V Jet. Gold Rush Blush went 2-4 in September. Low Ink, they did not play in October. Hopefully we'll see them in November. Gold Rush Blush is a tongue twister waiting to happen. And if I do end up commentating them, I'm just going to call them Team Gold to avoid making myself look like a jackass. That wraps up Swiss. If we go into Top Cut, 4 teams made Top Cut. The only team that went 4-1 that didn't qualify was Luminescent Inc. They finished 5th. I don't know what the tiebreaker was. Going 4-1 and not making Top Cut is rough. Normally, I say win your games. Only losers complain about tiebreaker rules. But if you go 4-1 and you don't make Top Cut, that stings. That's kind of harsh to say, to demand that you go undefeated in Swiss to make Top Cut. So I want to give a shout out to Luminescent Inc. for having a great tournament, even though they didn't make Top Cut. The 2 matches that we saw, the first match, I Ride versus Thanksgiving Dinner. This was the best match on stream, not just because it went to a full game 5 that I Ride won 3-2, but also because Thanksgiving Dinner had some really great IGNs here. I guess depending on how you look at it. The IGNs for Team Thanksgiving Dinner: potato, cran sauce, green beans, and leftovers. I have no idea who these guys actually are. If anyone in chat or anybody who watches this later on YouTube knows who Thanksgiving Dinner actually was, send me that information, because I'm kind of curious to see who those guys were. I think it might be last checkpoint. We saw a team called CEOs, and their players were all named like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and like Bill Gates. So I wonder if like this is the same team. They just find a new trend to change all their names to. But if you just okay, but let's be real here. If I come to Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house and all they have is mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and green beans, what kind of Thanksgiving dinner is that? Freaking Charlie Brown had at least popcorn. Are you kidding me? So, but regardless of the names and all that stuff, great set. I Ride won the first 2. Thanksgiving Dinner, the potato switched to using the blah bobbler. And apparently that worked out really well. They won the next 2 games. Shout out to Green Beans as well. Played really good on NZAP. In Game 5. Game 5 was fantastic. This was Clam Blitz at Wahoo World. And it came down to literally the last play, the last push that Thanksgiving Dinner took to take lead, and they had a power clam, and they just missed the throw. The power clam basket on Wahoo World is kind of awkward because it's right up against that wall there. So they just barely missed that throw. If they made that throw, they win the game. They miss it, and they lost. A heartbreaking way to lose, but a fantastic game to watch on stream from a spectator's perspective. So congrats to I Ride for finding a way to win there. And then in grand finals, Omega Rush played I Ride, and it was over just as soon as it started. Omega Rush won 3-0. I Ride versus Omega Rush. Both these teams are low-ink teams. I Ride went 2-4 in October. They turned things around in this month, going 6-1 in this checkpoint tournament. The only team to beat them, Omega Rush in grand finals. For Omega Rush, interesting thing about them is that they do have one player on their team called Omega Rush. Like that, their IGN is Rush and their tag is Omega. So their team name and player name are the same exact thing. It's a it's narcissistic, I believe, is the word for that. But we give them a pass here. Also, Milky on Tetras looked pretty good. For Omega Rush though, they played in October and September, but dropped after like the first couple of rounds in Bofa in those two tournaments. So hopefully Omega Rush can actually stick it out and play throughout the whole tournament this time around. Um, the last team to win Checkpoint 1 was Checkmate. And we haven't really seen those guys since. So we like to see more of Omega Rush here. We'll kind of get a sense of where the best team in Checkpoint 1 kind of stacks up against other teams in low ink. It'd be a good way to kind of gauge how the skill level for this tournament. But again, overall, and I know Roundy is probably waiting for me, and I appreciate his time, but overall, a great tournament for um, Checkpoint 1. Hopefully, we see more in-house tournaments like this in the future because they were really good to see. And we'll probably get a lot more teams signed up for it next time, just based off of all the exposure it got on the stream alone. I wouldn't be surprised just because of the pool of players that are available to sign up for something like this, that this becomes the biggest tournament in the whole community. There's now, if you just look and say, well, there's only 21 teams that signed up, but again, 99% of the community would be interested in something like this. They just don't know it exists. If we could spread the word of mouth about this tournament more, this sucker could blow up for real. Um, and that sounds like a nightmare to TO it. But from my perspective, of someone who just watches it and talks about it on a podcast like this, that sounds like a great thing. So, but regardless, we're gonna take a quick break. We're gonna come back with Round D and talk about the Western Top 50. You are watching or listening to the Popcast. Hi, Carrot. Sure, I have everything on correctly. Now, before I bring in Roundy, a quick transition because this is kind of awkward. We just went from talking about the lowest part of the community to now literally the top in the top 50. There is a reason why I'm doing this transition. First off, I have often ranted, like I said, about Ludi being bad for ranking and that we need a new system to kind of take over for that. So that's part of the reason. The other is we there are some lower level teams that are ranked. Well, there are some teams from the lower level that are ranked into this top 50. So there is like a path here for the casual listener to the podcast that plays in low ink that might eventually become a team that's in the top 50. So this is more so something to look forward to in the future. But with all of that being said, welcome into the podcast, the one and only Roundy, former member of Beastie Koi's, current player for Big Yoshi's Fruit Adventure slash Wiggler Ahoy, and also a fellow teammate of mine from the best team ever to represent Indiana, the Cornfield Yakuza. Roundy, welcome in to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad Cornfield Yakuza is getting some representation today.
You know what? The accomplishments we have had as fellow Hoosiers shouldn't be go. ITAP kind of gets all the praise because everybody loves them, but you can't forget about the Cornfield Yakuza. But more importantly, my first question for you is: when Wiggler Ahoy disappears, what is going to be the next Super Mario Sunshine mission name that you will use to replace it with?
Well, actually, like we've probably used at least 10 at this point because I don't know. I did a pickup with Soren, I think Greg and Bronze, with Shadow Mario on the loose. A lot of the big
Yeah,
Yoshi names, if you go back to like past swimmer sinks or testing grounds, like it's Big Yoshi, and then there's like a little thing on the end of it, and like I think one is like Big Yoshi at the park, Big Yoshi runs wild. They're like all references to Mario missions.
yeah.
I don't. There's probably at least 10 of them that we use.
I forgot about Shadow Mario Runs Wild. I did see that somewhere. I, I should have known that was you. Now, transitioning from Mario Sunshine to the Western Top 50, could you explain the process of how this list is put together for someone who is just now hearing about it for the first time?
Sure. So basically, I kind of just made a spreadsheet that compiles like all the tourney results from October, and then like each team is like a little row on this hypothetical sheet that has like their wins, results, placements, losses throughout the month. And then like I made copies of that and sent it out to two other people and told them to like put their top 50 in order. And then the way the points are worked, it's kind of similar to how the NCAA does things, where they'll like have a list of coaches that will like rank the top 25, for example. And like the way those systems work is like the top team on a list earns 25 points, the next team earns 24, next team 23, and so on. Ours has, since it has 50, the top team earns 50, next is 49, and so on. So the 50th team earning 1 point. And then we like just combine all those points from all three of our sheets, so you end up getting your top team with 150 points, and then it goes down. So that's the way the teams are compiled. We pretty much just looked at their wins, losses, how they placed, and also important to note that to be on this list, you had to play at least two events, and you had to play at least one event that wasn't like region locked, which I think I'll end up going into that later.
Mm.
But yeah, so obviously there were like a handful of top teams that like only played one event this month that aren't on the list. So that's the reason why.
Um, how many man hours do you think goes into making a list like this?
Uh, I don't know. Probably like to put in the tourney results, it's probably like 3 or 4 hours, but it's split up like over 10 like little mini sessions. And then I know for each of the other committee members, when they made their list, Magic actually streamed his whole list ranking making process, and I think he
Mm-hmm.
took about 2 or 3 hours to determine his top 50. So yeah, it's probably like four from me, 2 or 3 from the other committee members.
And you said there's three total members right now, or just three that
There,
worked on the past month.
yeah, there were 3 that worked on the pass list. I think this is probably a question we get into later. We have 6 committee members right now who are going to be making the November list. So
Oh, okay. So we've already doubled. Yeah, I was gonna ask about. So I guess when it comes to this list, it's more so. I mean, obviously, like one team beats another, so you might put them above that, but it's more so like the eyeball who passes the eyeball test versus like, oh, you won this game, so you get like a certain amount of points. Kind of like how Midway does their ranking. It's like how you finish in a tournament, you get a certain amount of points. But with all the wide variety of tournaments, this ranking system is just more. It's more about the eyeball test, I would assume, as far as like how
yeah,
you
I'm
would
glad
rank
you
a
actually
team.
brought up the ranking. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the ranking system because I think the most recent thing that like ranked teams like this was Splat Stats, and Splat Stats did do a point system where like I think if you like get first, like this is just like an example, but it was like say you get first in an attorney with like 20 teams, that's worth like, let's say 100 points on their system. If you get first in a tournament with like 100 teams, that's like 500 points or something. So it was all point based. But the problem with like that system is that you end up with like situations where like set to destroy X is like 38th place or something. They were just because like they don't play tournaments. Um, so I don't know. And it also, I think, ran into situations where like it didn't account for like how top heavy or bottom heavy a tournament was in terms of
Right.
the team signing up. Because like, for example, around the same amount of teams like would go to a LAN like Genesis 5 compared to like a low ink at the time when Splat Stats was out. But like since they both had the same amount of teams, like winning a low ink was like valued the same in their system as winning a Genesis 5. So like those, like I'm sure you could definitely make a system like Splat Stats. It would just be, you'd have to have like so many contingencies that I think it's kind of easier to just have the eyeball test kind of system that we have right now, where there is like data backing up like every placement on the list. But it definitely, like obviously all three of our lists weren't the same. So there's definitely like room to debate where these teams should fall.
Yeah, it sounds like you're doing exactly what an NCAA bracket is kind of set up, or ranking system. But yeah, I mean, yeah, each tournament's not the same. If you look at just SOS, two SOSs ago, FT Win won, but they only dropped one game the whole time. In grand finals, they played a pickup team. The week after that, they had to bracket reset Starburst. So like winning that
Yeah.
tournament obviously holds a lot more weight than the one where they played in where nobody could even touch them. So yeah, that's a great example of why the point system for something this universal wouldn't work. But why 50 teams and not something like 25 or more? What was the mindset behind just 50?
Um, the 50 teams is honestly subject to change possibly in future months. But the reason I felt like 25, like there wouldn't be as much debate for like who the top 20 should be. Like I feel like you'd probably have like a little bit of like movement around like the 23 to like 28 range. But also I like obviously I'm kind of biased towards mid level because that's where I will eternally be in this community. But if you do 25, you don't really get many of those teams represented. So I kind of like top 50 because also top 50, like around the high 40s, is when you start seeing like low ink graduates or like low ink contenders. And I kind of wanted like those teams to like show up and kind of get recognition. Honestly, kind of debating maybe bumping it up to 60 in the future. It kind of depends also like how much the rest of the council like wants to work. Because like when I bump up more teams, it's like honestly gets harder because the low and like lower level teams have even like more results through these like tourneys that you cover like Minnow Cup, Ash Cup, Low Ink, which when you're only doing top 50, like those results don't matter as much because most of the teams, there's like usually 45 other teams that like are banned from it that are getting good results anyway. But then like it essentially like almost adds like another third of like tournaments we have to look into. But
Right.
I could see the list being more than 50. 50 is also just like a nice round number. So
Well, I'm kind of skipping ahead here, but it's kind of relevant to what you're saying. One thing about this list is that there's a lack of EU teams, and I think that's just because there wasn't enough tournaments that kind of catered to both NA and EU teams um, in the last month, other than like Ink to Pink. But yeah, if there's more tournaments like that, and we see some more of the EU teams play, and get like those two tournaments in that you're talking about where one isn't region locked, that would bump off like a huge chunk of teams from the top 50, I would assume. But what do you kind of agree with that, or do you think there were like a lot of EU teams that if they played in more tournaments they would make the list?
yeah, of course. Like, well, looking at the like five EU teams in Tassel, only one of them played outside of Tassel. So, like, if those other four teams just play an event, then like they're all probably guaranteed like a high spot on the list. Also, a rule I mentioned earlier is like we had a rule that you had to play at least like one non-region locked event, and there are a lot of French teams that only play in French tournaments, which we were like really scratching our heads like how to rank them if at all, because like French Ludi had just started, so like teams had technically played two events because they were in a French Ludi group and they did like one French tourney, but like they've only played three sets for the whole month and they're all against other French teams. So it kind of like makes them hard to rank when they're only playing like teams in their region, which is why we had that rule. I'm also hoping that rule kind of encourages them to like branch out the tourneys they play. I know there might be like for some regions like a language barrier, but hope that's like another issue. Hopefully this spreads light on.
Um, what what is the goal of this top 50 list?
I think it probably depends like between members of the council, like what their goal for it is, because I think Magic kind of wants this to be a like way to replace the divs. I think that'd be kind of cool, but I also don't expect it to happen anytime soon, at least, just because I think the reason like the divs are so prevalent is that the main server people look in for like pickups and scrims is the server that also like validates those divisions and stuff, and also like I feel like just being able to say Div 2 is a lot more concise. Being able to say, top 30 only. But yeah, I don't know. Part of the reason I made this list is like I seed a handful of tournaments, not as much as I used to, but I love complaining about other tourneys seeding.
Who
Um,
doesn't?
yeah, I don't know. I There were some swimmer sinks that I thought had some pretty questionable seating lately. So if having like this nice list to look at, I don't know. There's always one team I like laugh at how often they're underseeded. It used to be Arctic Moon, but Arctic Moon's been getting respect lately. But recently, my pet peeve is like Michelin Heroes. If you look back at some like swimmer sinks, they have laughably low seedings. But so like I think
Mm.
other tourneys like there's a team you haven't heard of, like just glance at the list really quick just to see if you have an idea of where they stack up to the other teams. Like obviously, I put a disclaimer that like just because a team isn't on this list doesn't mean they shouldn't be seated higher than a team that is. But I don't know. I also feel like people rely like on a team's past reputation too much for like seating and stuff instead of like recent results. So I'm hoping this list kind of helps with that.
Yeah, yeah, that's that's definitely an issue for sure. And yeah, SOS rankings have been kind of weird. Uh, I don't have anything to comment on that, but that's just something I've noticed myself. I don't complain because my team
Oh yeah.
always get.
Also, NA Opens is also a huge one. I forgot to mention. I always love complaining about NA Open seating. So hopefully he's helped with that.
Well, that NA Open's a completely different beast altogether. I mean, yeah, like you traditionally see teams that have some sort of resume get some sort of ranking, but it seems like the vast majority of teams are just giving a random ranking. But yeah, there's always like that one team that slips by that is like number 400 something, but then you look at their roster and it's just like a loaded Div 1 pickup and you're like, whoa, what? And then those guys like upset somebody who is like, what, 500 seeds above them technically. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's what you're getting at. I've seen those things. Like, I
Oh
know.
no. Well,
Uh,
that's part of it. I also feel like sometimes the NA Open, it's more of a who just like it kind of depends because I think there was one NA Open I really like the seating because like KBot went all out to like make sure every team was represented. But sometimes it just feels like it's a matter of like who the seeder on that day actually knows as a team. So like you could be like a hypothetical Div 2 team who has beaten many of the teams competing in the NA Open, yet get ranked below multiple teams you've beaten in tournaments lately. Just hypothetically, that may have happened once.
You mentioned Magic being anti-looted seats. That's not a surprise. I've had Magic on the Popcast before, and I gave him the opportunity to rant about looted divs. And I share kind of the same thoughts he has. But for if this is to eventually replace Ludi as a whole, it would need to find a way to cater to the lower level community, basically like Div 4 on down of Ludi that's not in this poll. Like those teams would still use Ludi because they're not going to be in the top 50. So how could a lower level team look at this ranking system and use it as like a guideline for themselves?
Yeah, that's a question we're trying to figure out too. Because like obviously expanding it by 10 spots, like to make it a top 60 or even a top 75, is it going to help? One thing I would like to plug though, Parias, who is also part of our council, does puts a lot of effort into making like a top 100 list for
Yeah.
lower level teams.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I would say our list probably isn't the best resource for them at the time. Like obviously, like we have an honorable mentions list that I think we'll probably talk about later, which is something they could like strive to show up on. But I'd say like check out Price's stuff because I feel like his list is probably a better resource for that than ours.
Yeah, I was gonna plug Parise's top 100 because I peeked at it last week after I awkwardly dump you, which I do. By the way, just this is a thing. I often, as soon as I say bye, I just cut you out and I keep talking on the podcast. That's I always follow up and say thank you to that person. But it always seems kind of like a weird way to end the interview, like I'm just pushing you out the door. But so just expect that, Roundy, and people in chat. But I always do go back and say thanks. It's just I keep the show going. Anyways, where are we here? We were talking about. You mentioned the honorable mentioned list. I saw ITAP made it. A few other lower level teams were on the honorable mention. What qualifies a team to make the honorable mentions list?
Um, we'll probably like we'll maybe try to get a concrete definition of like what earns a team a spot there in upcoming months. But for this past month, it was pretty much either a team that's like obviously in your like 51 to 55 range, so like a team that barely made your list, a team that's like beaten teams that are in the top 50, but not enough to like get a spot themselves. Um, I think those are like the two main qualifiers, or just a team that signed up for a lot of. I think like Vento. I don't know if they beat a team in the top 50, but they signed up for a lot of events and like took games off of
Yeah.
teams that were in the top 50. So that's why they were on the list. But yeah, I'd say like teams like Xanadu, Ravenous Raccoons, like Xylo, those Port Raccoon were like pretty obvious like teams for like the 51 to 55 range that just ended up getting left out just because we have it at the top 50. Yeah, going forward, we might try to like make those more concrete or like just make it any team that beat a team in the top 50 that isn't in the top 50.
By the way, I guess I should have posted this earlier. The Moo asks, "Where's this list?" The list is here in chat. You can also go to Roundy's Twitter, which is at Roundy Bout. That's Roundy Bout, and it is one of the tweets that he has on there as well. Um, I'm kind of jumping around the list of questions that I sent you earlier, but you did mention one of your goals personally was to help TOs with seeding. Do you think TOs will start looking at this top 50 and use it as a guideline for seeding in tournaments going forward?
I know for a fact that Low Ink is looking at it, and I assuming the rest of IPL knows it exists. Yeah, one thing I didn't think of when making the list, but it also might get turned into like a way to ban teams from like restricted events like Low Ink and possibly SAC. I'm not sure about that one though. But yeah, the way the list turned out, it kind of ended up being like low ink teams and like low ink graduates are like in the high 40 spots. Um, but yeah, I know for a fact IPL is looking at it, and like I hope if it gets more attention, then like other tourneys will hopefully like use it to help with seeding. Obviously, there's teams not on it that probably deserve high spots, but it's like if there's two teams on the list and you don't know where to put one another, then probably just use the list.
Well, for low ink in particular, because I'm a huge part of the verification for teams on that. Yeah, it's supplemental information, but keep in mind we do verify literally every single player in depth that signs up for low ink, so it wouldn't be like it's just for us it's just another person's additional opinion, which is helpful, but there would never be a point where like, oh well, they got ranked at this spot, that means there's an auto ban. So persistence, if you're listening, don't worry. They're the one team I'm assuming you're referencing because
Yeah.
um speaking of feedback, in this I believe this will be the last question, then I'll let you go because I know you are donating some valuable time right now. Have what kind of feedback have you gotten so far about this list? Without naming anybody's name in particular, but like, have you received feedback?
Yeah, a lot of it was just like about the lack of EU teams, especially top level ones. I don't think we're gonna change like our rule that you have to enter two events because obviously there's a lot of like top level EU teams that only play Tassel or only show up to like one weekend tourney a week that aren't on here. Um, However, I think the mid level EU teams we could have done a better job on, and our council for November has three EU people on it, so I'm hoping that'll help. Um, that's like the main thing. Another thing I realized is that there's a lot of we try to if we see like three players from a team that's already on the list playing an attorney under a different name, like as a pickup, we'll like include the results with their original team, but not as much. Like don't give it as much weight just because it is a pickup. However, there are like I think Requiem was one that like they entered attorney under the name Wednesday, and all
Yes.
their they use like funny names for all their members, and we just didn't put that in our results when it probably would have like been relevant. So we'll probably I don't know. Honestly, it'd be easier if people would just stop alting and using silly names and tourneys, but that's not going to go away anytime soon. Um, so we're going to try to do a better job of just like catching whenever that happens and like when it's relevant to our results. Because yeah, I feel like if I had noticed that for Requiem, they'd probably be up like one or two spots in the list.
Well, I mean, I actually commentated that one match that they did in SOS where they were Wednesday. Yeah, it was I forget, it was Wednesday something, and I knew it was a Requiem, but I mean, like, the only way you would know is if you dig deep into every roster of every team that signs up for every tournament. So yeah, like that's on Requiem for trying to hide them. They weren't hiding themselves. They just had a pickup and they were
Yeah,
doing
I know
things
it's not
illegally.
malicious, but
Yeah, but yeah, you can't make the art. Well, why am I not on the list? Well, help your brand out. That's why.
yeah, but
Um,
yeah, there were other teams that like I think Psycho did it. Azure does it all the time.
yeah.
Where we did catch it and include it in the results. So like I'd like to be consistent because if we don't catch these teams that are like using alternate names, like there's going to be a lot less data for high level just because it's so common. But also like if I'm catching some of it and not catching the other cases, then it's kind of it could like be biased in a certain team's direction.
Well, Azure usually does something blue themed in their name, so they
Yeah,
at
yeah,
least
Azure's
they're at least consistent with their inconsistency, if that makes sense. um, Before I let you go ahead and plug. You at least made a post that you were looking for stuff. Are you still looking for more help on the council? And if so, where can people go to find information about that?
Yeah, it's there's a I could just put the link in chat. There's a
Okay.
link on the document for the top 50. Yeah, we have six people on council. I'd probably stop adding people at either seven or eight. But yeah, I wouldn't be against putting a new person in. So I'm putting the link to the form in chat
Hmm.
for anyone interested. Um, yeah, I'm a TO for Midway, so playing that. That's really all I have to plug right now, at least.
You've made a great tweet about calling out pickup team names who have bad names. Like, I don't know what to call myself. Can you give me one team name right now that anybody who listening to this can use that doesn't have the doggone word ink in it, please?
Uh, I'm kind of can't think of any Mario Sunshine levels. Usually I go to lyrics from the song Smooth. So let's say like 7 inches from the sun. That's a good pick up.
7 inches from the sun. I'm calling you out right now. If you're listening to this, I want to see a 7 inches from the sun team in a tournament this upcoming weekend. Roundy, I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on, and I think this list. I hope to see this list kind of grow, in not grow in the sense of add more teams, but grow in terms of attention and significance in this community in the future. So thank you for coming up with this idea, and to all your staff or council members as well for helping this out.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is fun.
And the awkward leave is now. That was roundy of the top 50 Western Splatoon teams in the council. I mentioned Parias's top 100, or it did get mentioned that I was going to talk about that briefly on the tail end here because I did kind of check in on Parias's stream of that, and actually Parias did a stream before that of like the behind the scenes of him just like doing research on all of these teams. So I think that's a good thing, and I would like I believe this is the third time Parias has done a list like that, and that list is on Parias's stream. I don't know exactly, or the VOD of that is on Parias's stream. I don't know exactly what the handle is. I believe it's Parias underscore Sky or something like that. But if you just type in Parias in Twitch search, you can find the link to that stream. I think 100 teams is way too much. I feel like the top 10 of that list is good, but I mean like teams 60 through whatever, like how could you accurately make a decision that like a team is at this like 80 or not 60 without there's just not enough data to go out there. And but regardless, it's nice to see. I think it's a legit fair system for teams to use in the lower level community. And I've often talked about this. We need multiple polls to come out, not just the top 50. Thank you, Mizuno. Parias underscore Sky 99. So definitely give that VOD a check. Um, it's interesting, and he explains why each team is where they are in depth. So it's not just I just feel like this team should be here or something like that. But yeah, we need multiple things like this. Again, this top 50 currently pertains to the upper slash mid level of the community. But if we want to get rid of looty divs, which we as a community should be actively fighting against, we need more polls like this. So the Pariah's top 100 poll, the Western top 50, give these things some more look, give these things some more attention, and give more feedback. Keep talking about these kinds of things because we need these things to keep growing in the future if we want to progress further as a whole. And with that, I believe that's all the talking I want to do today on a Monday. Um, if you would like to be a part of the podcast in any way, you can reach out to me on Twitter at Mr. underscore Popgun, Twitch, Popgun25, YouTube at 25 Popgun. I save all my VODs on YouTube, and I'll try to make a good mental note to actually add the links in chat into the description and YouTube below. And Discord at Popgun hashtag 5882. We are going to raid. Let's go back to Grub Dog. Haven't raided old Grubby in a while. What is Grub Dog's handle? It's just Grub Dog. That's simple enough. Hey, we survived last week. Congratulations. Let's keep surviving. Make sure you wear a mask. Make sure it covers your nose. Make sure it covers your mouth. You people do breathe through your nose, so make sure you keep it covered. The virus isn't going to go away until you guys wear a mask. You morons.